Hi, I'm Joe, and this is the Decahedron RPG Podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Joe, and this is episode 102 of the Decahedron RPG Cast. Hey, thanks for listening. This is primarily going to be a feedback episode, but I'm also announcing my next giveaway. And just like before, it's going to be a little bit of a mystery, but for a different reason. I'm recording this on Sunday, November 12th. Friday night, I was suddenly hit by inspiration, and I'm not going to tell you what the inspiration is yet for obvious reasons. I just sat down. I started piecing together a rule set for an RPG for a certain, genre type thing. And that's kind of weird because I usually try to make them whenever I do a rule set, I like generic rule sets, kind of like GURPS and stuff. So when I write one, I try to make them like that. But no, this one is very specific, and I'm calling this game Shirts and Skirts. And the giveaway is for you to tell me what this game is about. Shirts and Skirts. And, I was going to say, that might just be a working title. I'll change it when it goes. No, I think I'm going to keep that title. And I think it's kind of obvious why I picked it once you know everything. But the contest is for you to tell me what you think Shirts and Skirts is about. Send in your entries right or wrong. I will pick one at random, and that person will receive a prize related to the theme of Shirts and Skirts. Again, I can't say what the prize will be because that will give away the answer to the contest. So, let me know. What do you think Shirts and Skirts is about? Like I said, this is November 12th. That means this episode is going live on November 15th. So I'd like to give you at least a month. Let's see what December looks like. Oh, yeah, that works out perfectly. December 15th is a Friday, and if I can try to get Daniel sometime after that to join me, that would rock. So I still have to get with Daniel, and if he's not available then, you might even get an extension on this. But right now, the deadline is December 15th. Write in, call in, whatever. Let me know what you think Shirts and Skirts is about. And again, don't worry if you're overseas or something. I will eat the postage to send you something. Although if it comes with customs due, that's going to be on you. But postage, yeah, no problem. I'll bite it, even if it's pricey. So Shirts and Skirts, tell me what it's about. And I have a clue right here that I am going to give to you. So here is the clue. So that's it. What do you think? What do you think it is? Write in, let me know. And like I said, you will win something. And I can't tell you what it is. I will probably drop another clue next week. So you write in and tell me your initial guess, and you write in again and say, no, based on this guess, it's something else. That's fine. In fact, I think that even sounds more fun. Actually, the next clue might not be next episode because that episode's already recorded. That's an episode with Jason about a review we did for a game called Tunnel Quest. So that will be next week because next week is in the US. It is Thanksgiving weekend, and it is the busiest travel day of the year. So I'm actually going to drop that episode on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. That way, if you have a long distance drive or anything, you can download it ahead of time and it will be there for your drive and such. All right, so that's it. With having said that, let's get started with Mailcall.
Mailcall from the United States of America.
Hey, Jason here. Really enjoyed episode 98 where you talk about your OD&D Ranger and Paladin, home rules or whatever you want to call it. And I have some thoughts. I have a feeling we're going to discuss this more on the Play forums, so listeners should go there, look in the show notes for the link. But really quickly, just to clarify, because I wasn't really sure. Are you still doing all the mixing of multi-class like you do in AD&D, or are you just taking a fighter, adding spells, and that's it? I wasn't sure about that. Are you rolling both hit die and dividing them and doing all that stuff, or no? I wasn't sure about that. As far as races class, OD&D doesn't have races class. I'd have to look at Holmes. I don't think Holmes has races class. BX and BECME and Rule Cyclopedia do. And I don't have an issue saying Rule Cyclopedia is slightly different than BECME because, I agree with that. I kind of think it's inferior to BECME, honestly. I think BECME reads better. It's a better starter set for new players. Rule Cyclopedia is a better reference guide, probably. But it lacks the flavor. And I don't like the art as much. But go back to your classes. Why aren't we using the Halfling as the Ranger? The Halfling makes a lot more sense to me as the Ranger base. So I'm kind of curious why we're not basing the Ranger on the Halfling. I think that makes a whole lot more sense. The Halfling has some abilities outdoor. They have their missile, bonus to missiles, things like that. So they kind of fit that Ranger ideal a little bit better. I like what you're doing here a lot, and I wouldn't have any problem including these in my game at all, whether it's just a fighter with a spell list or whether we're, rolling both sets of hit points and dividing and taking the highest save and throw for either class. However you're doing it, I'm not against either of these options. For BECME and BX, if you want to do it as, class, effectively, where, I'm down with that too. If you have to have demi-humans and semi-humans, then, yeah, I think the breakdown's fine. Maybe, I don't remember, I don't think they have half-elves in those. So, yeah, I would probably make them halflings. That way your dwarf is your cleric fighter, your elf is your magic user fighter, and your halfling or hobbit is your druid fighter. That's kind of the way I would go with it. But I will also bring this up in the play forums, and I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm looking forward to your retinkering of the Thief next episode. Take care.
Hey, Jason, thank you for that. And by the way, everyone, Jason is the host of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, another excellent podcast. You very much should give it a listen if you have not already. So, this was all about my weird idea for the Ranger and the Paladin. So I'm glad that you liked it overall. Yeah, I like it too. The first note I wrote down is mixing a multi-class. I don't know what I meant by that, so I'm going to go on and let me think about what I was thinking when I wrote that down. Next thing you said was that race as class in ODD. You said that D&D does not have race as class. So I use the term OD&D very sloppily, and yeah, that's on me. I'm sorry. That's me. But I will contend that a lot of times when I say OD&D, I mean OD&D, the original white box. I do not mean Grey Hawk and onwards, no supplements. And I don't think that's really a defensible position. I think you can say, well, these books supplemented OD&D, so they're part of the. And so, but I don't think of them. I think of them as splat books for OD&D, and yeah. Anyway. That's all me. I will argue, though, that in OD&D, if you ignore Greyhawk onwards, you effectively have race as class because, well, your humans can be any of the classes. Your dwarf and your halfling can only be fighters. So they have that race of class built in. The exception might be that your elf with that weird choose between each adventure if it's a fighter or a magic user, but that's very specific to the elf. And so again, I would say that is a race as class thing. So I would say that it does have race as class, but I'm not standing on soapbox and saying you're wrong for not thinking that, because if you get extremely technical, yeah, it's not race as class. But if you only have one choice, it kind of is race as class in my mind. The next thing you said is that Rule Cyclopedia is a better reference guide than it is like an intro to the game. And of course, you're right, because that was exactly the point of Rule Cyclopedia. That was during the era of the Aaron Alston black box D&D, that big black box basic set that I have on my bookshelf over there, and the gold box. They're actually the same thing, only in different size boxes. The gold box actually fits on my bookshelf a little better. But anyway, those were the intro. And then instead of saying go by, expert and all that, they were like go by the Rule Cyclopedia. The other thing I like about the black boxes is that they go up to 5th level instead of 3rd level. Things I don't like, they have the little maps in there and they kind of play it like a miniatures board game. Don't like that. But yeah, so definitely Rule Cyclopedia was intended to be a reference guide, and it fits that bill perfectly, I think. Halfling as a ranger. Yeah, you could do that. It's all how you view the races in your world. You make excellent arguments for halflings to be rangers. I don't like it because of Tolkien, pretty much, because Frodo and his crew, they meet Aragorn, who is the ranger. That is the prototype for the D&D ranger, and so it just seems weird that they would be rangers. I still think of as halflings as beings that like to stay in their own little town and not go out in the wilderness and stuff, and that's why I don't view them that way. But there's no reason for it to be that way, right? So if you want to view halflings as that way in your world, go for it. I also like the division between the high elves and the sylvan elves, which isn't in OD&D at all. It's very much at the core of the Lord of the Rings. It shows up in AD&D, of course. And so for that to me gave a purpose for a wood elf and to make it different from the elf. But again, that is something I would want in my multiracial world. But of course, that overall I would prefer not to have a multiracial world, and I would prefer a more swords and sorcery or swords and sandals type human only world. And I think that then made me remember what you meant by mixing the multi-classes. When I'm doing these, how am I doing it? Am I doing it like the AD&D, or am I just saying, add the spells? So the way I would do it, the way I would present it to someone, it's not really the way I would do it. I'll talk about that in a second. The way I would suggest it to be truest to the sense of OD&D is I would kind of do the AD&D method. You divide your experience points by 2, one for both classes, and then each class levels up on its own and gets the full hit die and all that stuff and the level benefits. So your levels will be different in each class depending on which one levels up first. That's the way I would do it for OD&D. The way I would do it at my house for real and for honest. So, a lot of people a lot of OSR people like to slam 3E. And yeah, there's a lot to not like there if you have an OSR mindset. But I think there are some things that 3E actually did better. I actually think that Ascending Armor Class is superior to Descending Armor Class. It is more intuitive. It is so much easier to explain to a newbie. You have a new player to the table. You can explain that so much easier. You don't need a chart. It makes sense to me. The other thing I like about 3E is the way they did multi-classing, where each level you can pick what class you want to level up in or gain. And so in the case of my Paladin or my Ranger, I like that approach the best too, because it lets you adjust that slider for your character. Like, is he a very fighter type Paladin and not very clerical? Or is he very clerical and not very fighter? Or does he keep it right in the middle? And each time he gains a level, he can just do it, pick that way. The way OD&D makes that difficult, of course, is that every class has different amount of XP that you need to gain. So I think maybe what I would probably do is I would just go with the higher class. So for a Paladin, well, actually for both, I guess that would definitely be the fighter. And every time, just use the fighter's levels. And every time the fighter would gain a level, you ask the player, well, are you taking that as a fighter level or a cleric level or a druid level if you're doing the ranger? That's how I would really do it, honest and truly. But that's not what I would present to other people, to suggest to other people to do, because I feel that's too much of a departure from the OSR mentality. Is that making any sense? I hope so. Anyway, Jason, thank you very, very much for that call.
Hey, Joe. Daniel from Bandits keep calling in. Your prediction is accurate for me. Anyways, I'm on the fence about the Paladin and the Ranger. I like it. I mean, if you were running a game and you made that an option, I might play one of them. I think they're it was a good idea, good implementation of it. I'm just, I'm not sure we need those things. And also, personally, I do not love spellcasting Rangers and Paladins. I know that the Paladin, at least from AD&D, and the Ranger from its get-go have been spellcasters, but it's just not how I see those character classes. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think I had made like an OSR Paladin once before, kind of what you did, except I combined the Cleric and the Fighter, so just like you did, but I took away the spellcasting, and I think I made the level advancement a little bit slower. So I think I used all the Cleric stats, but they could use all the weapons, no spellcasting. Because I like the idea of a Paladin turning undead. I don't know why. I mean, there's obviously no precedent for that, I guess, but that feels like a holy warrior turning back evil feels more clean to me than them casting spells. I guess even in the original Paladin and OD&D they can heal, but again, I don't love that. But yeah, cool. I like it. As you said, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know if you need them. I feel like what I would probably do, and as I'm throwing down, is generally if somebody said, hey, I want to play a Ranger, I would say, what do you imagine a Ranger does? And I would go from there, because I think people have different perceptions of what a class does, and I think that's important. So they might not care about, like in my case, the spellcasting. So maybe they just want to have tracking and an animal friend, and maybe that's just something you can tag a couple extra 100 experience points onto the fighter and be done. So very cool. Keep it up. I'm loving your OSR October stuff, as all the stuff you do, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for that. And everyone, Daniel is the host of the Bandits Keep podcast. Again, another great podcast. By all means, check it out. I am subscribed. I didn't say I was subscribed to Jason's, but I am. Okay, Daniel. So as for being on the fence, I think you're being polite there, and you just don't want to say you don't like it. But you know what? It's okay to not like things. Not everybody agrees on everything all the time, right? In fact, any two people should never agree on every single item all the time. I mean, my wife is probably the closest, to my thought process as anyone in the universe, and she and I disagree on things sometimes, and that's okay. All you do is you say, we disagree, and you press on, and you treat each other with respect, which you did so wonderfully, sir, and I appreciate that. You said you're not a fan of spells for what you see as a paladin, and that's fine. I want to say, if you look at the Song of Roland, that the Paladins did have miraculous events, and that was part of their whole shtick. So I feel that miraculous spell casting fits the role of the Paladin. But again, that's just like I was saying to Jason in the previous call. It's how you see your world. I see Paladins as being, the Song of Roland. Little side note, I have walked in the valley where Roland was ambushed and killed. And, maybe I should mention that in the travel podcast once we start that. It was actually the very first day of the Camino. We went over the Pyrenees, and it leads you to that valley where the legend says that, the Horn of Roland and all that. I don't know if anyone's ever read the Song of Roland. That was a big Arthurian myth geek when I was in high school. And then when I learned about, the Paladins and all that. The Paladins are more or less the French version of the Round Table, right? So, where was I going with all this? I don't know. Oh, not a fan of spells. So, like I said, they fit my vision. They don't fit your vision, and that's fine. And then your last comment about how would you imagine a Ranger to be? I love this. This isn't what I would do for OD&D, but I love this. This is what I would do for almost any other game. When I talk about being a narrative player, that's exactly the type of thing I do. And really, all I would normally do in any other game type thing, almost like Fate, right? You would give them an aspect of being a ranger. And anytime they try to do anything rangerly, you use that aspect, right? And so they either have to pay you Benny, or that you get to invoke it if you feel you should be able to compel a certain behavior because they're a ranger. I don't know, maybe someone's burning down a forest or something, they would try to stop them. Is that Ranger or is that Smokey the Bear? Well, he does wear a ranger hat. Wow, Smokey the Bear is a ranger. Huh. Anyway, we agree 100% on that. Although, again, for some reason, I wouldn't use that on an OD&D type game. But that brings me to another point, is that this Paladin and this Ranger, I think if you dig around my blog at some point, you will see my original post where I had these ideas. And they talk about another thing. So I've talked about Lucky 7 a lot in this podcast. You know, that's my pet project RPG that I'm working on. 100% you would not like it. And that's cool, right? Because it's a single mechanic game. You don't like single mechanic games, whatever. I love them. So that's what I'm making. But before Lucky 7 is actually play on the name of another system I had that was called Unlucky 13. And Unlucky 13 was meant to be a bolt-on system for some modernizations for OD&D, for OSR-style games, and included the task system and a task resolution system. And just like the name implies, if you remember what I talked about before, in Lucky 7, you roll a d12 and you try to get a 7 or better. In Unlucky 13, you need a 14 or better. And on a 12 or less, you fail. On the 13, that's that miss by one thing where you can succeed at a cost. And I had a whole bunch of rules about that. And in Unlucky 13, that is very much how I would do a Ranger type thing. Plus, Unlucky 13 had talents. So I would suggest that you take your talents in like wilderness survival for a Ranger type thing. But yeah, so that's how I would do it around my table, just like I was just saying with Jason. The ideas I presented on the podcast were what I would present to the OSR community as things that you could easily do in your game, and I feel are very true to the OSR ethos, if you will. Whereas these more extreme versions, I think they move away from the mindset of the OSR. And while I would freely use them at my table, I don't think I would suggest that for an OSR October episode. But that's me. And anyway, Daniel, as always, thank you for your call, and happy podcasting.
Hey, Jason here. Thieves is a magic user subclass. I can see it. If you're playing a game where you're making a bunch of subclasses, I can definitely see that. Maybe a magic user fighter mix, right? But I do wonder, and I know you kind of addressed this, because we limit how many times they can do it a day. But, you know, why not just have a magic user that picks all these kind of spells and specializes that way? Do they really need to be a separate class? Or they can just be a magic user that is selecting certain kind of spells? Maybe all you have to do is allow them the access to pick the spells they want instead of getting random spells. The other thing, of course, is spell creation. Characters can create their own spells, so your magic user can research and create those clerical spells like find traps. You don't have to make a new spell list. They can research and create those on their own. So I think you can already do this pretty much by the rules. As far as casting and then retaining spells for future use that day, you know, doing a roll for that kind of thing. There are several games out there that have subsystems that allow that kind of thing. I think that the game Daniel and I talked about over my podcast, the supplement original edition campaign, we talked a couple weeks ago when you get this, that has that kind of rule in there. There are a number of OSR games that give that option. And that's definitely another way you could do it, is a way to retain a spell. The Holmes and Clark rule set also provides that option. So very interesting. I'd be happy to go through with you and help identify all the spells that are fiefy. I'll reach out to you separately. I'm happy to do that. Very interesting. I'm very excited also to hear the results of whether James is a min-maxer or not, or a power gamer. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.
Hey, Jason. Thank you for that. So the answer to why not just a magic user is exactly what you said. I picture this as being a very different kind of magic that they're tapping into. That's why it's role based. It's not fancying. It is the, you know, do I make my spell roll so I can cast again today? And I think that makes it a different type of thing in my mind. If I were to use that same magic system for all magic users, which I might be very tempted to do, I am not a fan of advancing magic. Never have been, never will be. That's just me. Then I would say, yeah, they probably don't need to be their own class. I would say then they would be their own college of magic users, although not nearly that formal because they're street thieves and stuff. As for identifying the spells, I know you would help me because you posted on the Play forums. I replied and I put down all my thoughts going through all the spells in the white box and in Greyhawk and identifying which ones I thought fit and didn't. So they are there on the Play forums. That's www.decahedron.com/boards. If anyone else wants to look at those. And you say you're dying to know whether or not James is a Munchkin. Of course, that was in episode 100. And what we finally decided is that James is not a Munchkin, but he is a Chuck.
Hey, Joe. Daniel Fernandez keep calling in about your Magical Thieves. They're very interesting. You know, it's funny because the way that I do Thieves skills currently in my OD&D game is anybody can do them, and they're based on the gear that you have. And one of the recommendations I have is that the magic user be the one that does it, because you get bonuses for, like, not having armor on and stuff like that. So it's funny because immediately I was like, yeah, the magic user is the thief. I don't know that you need a whole separate class for it, but I definitely think it's super interesting. Like, I could see, again, that's why I do it the way I do it. The magic user has the skill to use lock, or anybody does really, can buy a set of lock picks and use it, and then when they get the knock spell, well, they use that one when they really need it, or invisibility or that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. I like the idea. I don't love roll to cast, as you know, but I don't love it because of how I've seen it implemented. That is to say that I see a lot of people do roll to cast with no real benefit or penalty. And that's really the thing. I mean, you're effectively giving that person unlimited magic unless there's a real penalty or benefit to rolling. So, I don't know. I don't think it fits in a world where other people can just cast. Maybe it does, you know, but I'm not sure. Again, I don't really use systems like that, so like mixed together, so I can be completely off base. Maybe it works perfectly. I just feel like that thief that can do a partial charm person or a levitate, you know, for less time or whatever, but can do it all day long is just going to be better than the magic user who can only do it once, even though it's guaranteed. So you end up creating an imbalance there. But if you make all spells like that, then, you know, hey, why not? You know, again, I feel like maybe the thief could also be an added-on class, right? Like it could be something like anybody can be a thief, but you pay an experience point penalty and you get these abilities, which effectively is the thief skills. I don't know. Anyways, it works. I like it. I would totally play it. In fact, taking all that you said, the new way to roll ability scores, the Traveler system, the Paladins and Rangers, and the Thief, I would totally play the campaign that uses all that. I think it all seems really fun, and it seems like it really works together. So, yeah, good on you. I like it. I'll play. After we play Tunnels and Trolls, of course. Talk to you soon.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you very much for that. All right. I wrote down like 5 different things here. First of all, you said thief skills. Anyone can do them. So I had brought this up with James years ago, and I said, I have this idea where every single character gets the thief skills at first level. That is, you can pick a lock with the same percentage that a first level thief can, and you can climb walls at the same percentage that a first level thief can. Because, well, first of all, he didn't like the idea. He didn't get what I was going at. But it's just like the fighter, right? When you start off, except in OD&D where you have that +1, but everyone fights like a first level fighter does, right? In fact, everyone increases in their fighting ability, right? I'm making up some numbers, right? So at a, I want to say a fifth level cleric fights as effectively as a 4th level fighter, right? And a first level magic user fights as effectively as a first level fighter. So why shouldn't a first level fighter be as effective as a thief as a first level thief? It only seems fair in my mind. Anyway, I could have probably done an episode of that, and you took that away from me. Bummer. You said about mentioning armor, and That is something I forgot to say to Jason in the last call, is that's the other reason I wanted it to be its own subclass, is because I feel that the thief subclass is not limited. And I probably left this out of my original episode, and that's why. Sorry. I feel that this thief subclass would not have the normal magic user restriction on armor and weapons. It would have the traditional thief restrictions on armor and weapons. So that's another reason for it to be its own class. And you said, why would it need to be its own class? So I just answered that, and I answered it in the last feedback with Jason. The other thing you said was roll to cast systems. Yeah, I know you're not a fan. I am. Like I've said many times, I left D&D in the 80s and I moved on to other systems. First one I moved on to was Powers and Perils and Dragon Quest. And eventually I stumbled upon GURPS, man-to-man as it was at the time. And I fell in love with that system, and I fell in love with their spell system, and that is very much a roll to cast system. There was even a web article by the infamous S. John Ross. At least I think it was him. Don't hold me to that. There's a chance I'm wrong. But S. John Ross wrote this article called Unlimited Mana about... so the Steve Jackson system... The Steve Jackson system is based a lot on the Tunnels and Trolls system, where you spend your strength to cast spells and then it regenerates. So S. John Ross... But then there are areas of higher mana where you don't have to spend as much or it regenerates quicker. S. John Ross wrote this thing where it was unlimited mana. Mana. So growing up in Rhode Island, I drop a lot of my R's at the end of a word. And so every so often when I say a word that feels like it should have an R at the end, I was like, oh, I just said that wrong. Like mana. Oh, was I trying to say manner? And I try to correct myself, and no, I was really trying to say mana. Anyway, S. John Ross wrote this article about unlimited mana, where you could just cast any spell you wanted. So GURPS required a spell check. Oh, in GURPS, a critical failure on a spell check was an out of control reaction, and there was sort of like a critical miss table for magic that you'd have to roll on. So in his system, but though any failure would be one, and he had a new table, and it was wild, and it was gonzo, and it was awesome for me at the time anyway. So that's a big inspiration. But yeah, I like roll to cast. I actually would have done a little more with the roll to cast. I actually tempered it down with you specifically in mind, just to make it a little more palatable for you. Anyway, thank you for those wonderful and awesome comments, sir.
Hey, Joe, I totally forgot to a couple of spells is lighter, so allows you to go upside down, right? So that's your thief thing going upside down. I would probably do something like Detect Invisible, because that would allow them to find hidden things, right? So I think that's probably pretty good. I think there's a Wall of Fog, which kind of, I don't know what James wanted with the Cloud Kill, but I wonder if that's not more appropriate, right? Throw a wall of fog up so you can kind of hide your actions, right? Whatever's going on. Like, I think, again, anything that kind of helps the thief sneak around, audible glamour, right, where you can just throw sounds, maybe phantasmal forces, although I feel like that's a really powerful spell. So, again, I think you're really creeping into the magic user domain here at that point. So, but yeah, I love the idea. Like, I wonder, would you be, like, writing versions of these spells for the thief? Or is it just they just get the spell? Because, again, that's where I probably wouldn't put things like phantasmal forces, because maybe that's too powerful, or put it at a much higher level, right? And, darkness would be another one, which I think would be cool. Possibly even light, right? Because a thief might sneak in. Infravision would be a good spell for a thief that they can see in the dark. So I feel like there's a lot of little kind of cool, useful spells that maybe your standard magic user doesn't use. You got me thinking that perhaps if you were going to do this, you could divide. Now you're getting into more complex. Now I'm getting into more complex things, where instead of having, your magic user and your thief share some spells, you really divide them up. And your magic user becomes a lot more of the, maybe more battle kind of guy, where they get, or in research guy, but they do the big impressive spells like your fireballs and stuff, where your thief magic user does all your, like, minor, for lack of a better word, cantrips, but not cantrip in the modern sense, right? So yeah, I think it's a great idea. I really do. Again, I'm not a huge fan of roll to cast, but I also wouldn't want my thief only to be able to use the open locks once a day. So I totally get why you do that. I mean, I wonder why not just make the thief skills themselves spells, and then just leave the thief the way they are. Like, what would be the reason to not do that? That's the question I have there. So there you go. Awesome conversation that I'm having with myself based on your podcast. It's always good when you get me thinking. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Daniel. So some of your message was lost to those mountains of New York again. So I'm just going to comment on what I heard. You said Detect Invisible, and yes, I do believe that is on my list. Again, if you go to the Play Forums, you don't even have to be a member, but if you go to the Play Forums, www.decahedron.com/boards, and in the Decahedron subboard there, I put my whole list up there, and I'm looking at it right now to see if Detect Invisible is on there. Oh, it is not. But it is on my list of, if it feels close, maybe it would work. So yes, I do have it written down with that note. You said Wall of Fog. That does sound like it would work. It sounds very wizardry to me. I mean, very thiefy. But I don't see it on my list at all. And I think because that is not a spell from OD&D or Greyhawk, and I was limiting myself to those two spell lists. As for would they have versions of their own spells? So if you look at that list I posted, yes, they would. Well, some would be, the same. But like one I noted was Polymorph Self. I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But a more limited version of it, I would call it Disguise. And I think that would be very much a Fifi skill. And actually, the way I had it planned, again, if you go back through my blog, and you'll see it all, is that actually the Fifi spells would power up over different levels. So the thief spell wasn't Polymorph Self. When you cast it at a lower level, it would be simply Disguise, but at a higher level, it would truly become Polymorph Self. But unlike a magic user that has to learn two different spells, it is only the one spell, and when he levels up, he's able to. That's not even quite true. If you cast it at a higher level, it has this other effect. And like I said, thieves aren't limited by the normal levels. A thief can cast a higher level spell than he normally would be able to. For example, you need to be a third level magic user to cast a level 2 spell, right? A level 1 or a level 2 thief could still cast that spell, but he's going to be taking a penalty on that roll, and there's the risk. By trying to do this, I have much less chance of success, and that will use up all my magic for the day. So do I want to do that? See, it is a very different class. Maybe I just left out all these details that I knew in my head when I made the podcast. And secondly, you said, why wouldn't you make the skills just spells? Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could. In fact, if you look at that post I have, there's actually two different approaches I did. In the approach at the top is let's map the existing thief skills to spells. And then the second one is let's take a look at all the spells and decide whether or not they would be thiefy. So yeah, you could do it that approach. I even thought about that approach. So yeah, I'm glad it has you thinking. That means even if you don't agree with the exact implementation, the concept of a magical thief rings true, and it just seems right, and it does to me. So awesome. Thanks for that very much, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jason here. Congratulations, James. You are not a Munchkin. Congratulations, Daniel, for winning the contest. Great 100th episode. Really enjoyed it. Also really enjoyed the first episode, the Lost first episode. Thought it was pretty good. I definitely would have listened and called back in the day. Although, well, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But all in all, very good. The only comment I have is disadvantages, like in GURPS, can either help role play without a doubt, but they can also contribute to power gaming and Munchkinism, because people take not so bad disadvantages to get points, to get better attributes or better advantages or whatever, right? It's been a while since I looked at GURPS. But so I like the idea of disadvantages, but I think disadvantages should be randomly rolled. I don't think they should be point buys, because I think when you make disadvantages point buys, it leads to power gaming. Or min-maxing, I guess, would be more accurate. It leads to min-maxing. Where if you have to randomly roll your disadvantage, you don't have that control. Now, I know some people don't like certain disadvantages. They don't feel they can play them. So maybe you roll 3 disadvantages and they get to pick one, whatever. But the key is they don't get to buy it and get points for that disadvantage, because that's where it leads into min-maxing. Great episode. Talk to you later.
Jason, thank you for that call. No, you're right. James is not a Munchkin. As we said, he's a Chuck. Congratulations, James. The Lost First episode. Yeah, of course, I recycled that content later on. One of the earliest solo episodes I did is that same content about using Kirk and Kahless, the Federation, and the Klingons for the basis of the alignments. Disadvantages can, of course, lead to Munchkinism, but I disagree with a lot of what you said there. But I will say, one of the things I had in my mind to say, when Mike and James were talking, is I was going to pop in with one way you can tell a Munchkin in GURPS is that they always take Pyromania, because it's like a 5 or a 10 point disadvantage. And all it means is you like to look at fires and start fires and stuff. Yeah, Munchkins almost always pick that one. You said that it shouldn't be a point buy. I disagree so strongly with that, because I feel that the glory of a system like GURPS, the beauty of that is it lets you make these wonderfully flawed characters that make sense in your mind. Right? I've talked before about my first GURPS character. Again, it was a man-to-man character. GURPS wasn't up yet, but whatever. And she had 3 disadvantages. Could not tell a lie, passivism, self-defense only, and maybe she only had 2. But because those matched her concept in my mind anyway. I wanted to play this honorable character in this non-violent character, but would defend herself if necessary. So they matched and they helped me make this character. So the problem isn't point buys. The problem is Munchkins as people. And if you have people that are doing that, you don't play with them. But you did give me an opening to talk about Lucky 7. Lucky me. So I will say the way I deal with this in Lucky 7 is that advantages don't have a cost and disadvantages don't have a cost. You don't get bonus points for taking a disadvantage. All you get to do is take an advantage. Instead, in an idea I absolutely 100% stole from Fate, you get paid for the disadvantage at the time that the disadvantage actually causes you a problem during gameplay. So every time that happens, you get an experience point. And that's how I do it. And so even if you're a Munchkin, if it doesn't cause you a real problem, you're never going to get those experience points. So it doesn't make a difference if you have that disadvantage. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much for that call. You rock, as always. Let's see who called next.
Hey, Joe. Daniel Plans keep calling in. Just listened to the episode number 100. Again, congratulations. And congratulations to me. No, that's awesome. Actually, cooler than the dice bag is the fact that I get to, I hope, if you keep up the tradition, hang out with you guys, or just you, and do the next award show. Because that's always fun. We had a great time recording last time. At least I did. And let's see, a couple quick thoughts. I wonder, so I guess now with this full definition, first of all, I got to read that article. I don't know that we were Munchkins when we were kids. So I guess I was fortunate enough to play the group where we kind of all helped each other out and played together. We didn't really, do that kind of stuff. But we were also very young when we played D&D. I think maybe that matters. I don't know. Maybe I think that like high school age is where you start really getting super competitive. I mean, we mostly played when we were like 9 and 10 years old. Anyways, you're the Vagabond GM part at the end. Awesome. That's a really cool idea. I agree with you. Sci-fi mixed with D&D is fantastic. So I would have replied to that podcast had it come out because I like those kind of ideas. I wonder if this isn't Munchkinism per se, but the thing that Michael was mentioning about rolling a character that has a 3 and then running around and tripping traps and stuff like that. To be honest, and again, I'm not throwing Michael under the bus here, but I almost find that to be almost as aggravating as somebody with all 18s. I think that if you are doing something that is, and again, he didn't say this, and I'm just imagining the worst case scenario of like, In fact, I was just playing in a game where somebody was like, I have a low deck, so I want to roll to see if I trip and drop my torch on this clearly flammable thing. And it's like, really? Like, that's what you're going to do? Like, nobody's asking you to roll this die. You just want to do it because you think it's funny. And now if you do it, the rest of the room's going to go up in flames, and now the party is screwed. I think that's just as bad, to be honest with you. So it's interesting. I think the Munchkin part that is the bad part of it is that you're doing something, whether it be taking the focus of the group to you, like overacting or whatever you want to call it, to the detriment of the rest of the group, whether you're doing it with high scores, low scores, role play, being a jerk, not kind of focusing on what the party wants to do in general. I think those are the bad traits of the Munchkin, but I think what people associate with it, generally when I've heard it and, kind of jokingly said, well, you're a Munchkin, is usually like, oh, you only want to play characters that are powerful. I think I could play a character with all 18s and not take everything away from the group. I mean, I think I could do that. So in your game, I'd like to have a character with all 18s if we could do that. I kid, but I would like that. Oh, actually, I think in Tons and Trolls, that wouldn't even be that good, would it? Anyways, all 52s. So that's a long enough message, but awesome. Thanks, all three of you, for that episode. Really fun discussion. I want to read that article, and I look forward to the next episodes.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for that. Yes, I am continuing that tradition. As you heard at the beginning of the episode, I think it's a great tradition. And just for anyone who doesn't know, new listeners maybe, so whenever you win one of my giveaways, you are invited. I stress invited because you are not compelled. But you are invited to join me on the next giveaway and be the co-host for that episode. And so as you heard, Daniel, in the beginning of this episode, I have already picked my next giveaway. So I will be getting with you to see if we can pick a recording date. But yeah, you are totally invited. And what we will be talking about is I will be presenting my whole idea for this game called Shirts and Skirts. And you can tell me how much you don't like it because it's a single mechanic game. You said that you were Munchkins at kids, and you said maybe it's because you were so young that you weren't. Maybe. Congrats. Good luck on that. Yeah, James and I and Don and Steve, the group we played with, Peter, 100% Munchkins at the time. And like you said, we came into it a little older. So it would have been the winter of 78 that James got the home set. So I would have been 13 at the time. Then you talked about sci-fi and D&D because I talked about it in that Vagabond GM. Yeah, Vagabond GM was one of the first working names of the podcast before I went with Decahedron because I have the Vagabond GM blog. What changed it to Decahedron is I happen to own the domain name already. So I was like, let me use it for this because what I was using it for wasn't happening anymore. Oh, and actually, as I said to Jason, the same content I used for that first one eventually showed up. I think it's episode 10 or, in those first ones. It was one of the very first solo episodes I ever did back when James was full-time co-host, and Jolos were something special. That was one of the first Jolos that I did. But yeah, Sci-Fi 100% totally agrees with D&D, and anyone who disagrees, I will point them at the original Blackmore campaign. Like I said, there was an alien. Blackmore itself was a site of a spaceship crash, and the very first magic item ever given out in a game of Blackmore, which would eventually become D&D, the very first magic item ever given out wasn't a magic sword, it wasn't a magic ring, it was a tricorder. So, And finally, you said that a 3 might be a Munchkin, and I'm going to disagree with you and agree with you at the same time. I agree that a person can play a 3 or an 18 or anything to the detriment of the group, and it doesn't have to be anything, right? It's that attention stealing, that spotlight stealing, right? The spotlight is on this player right now, but I want it to be on me, so I'm going to do that. So what you're explaining is just a negative player behavior. And there are lots of those. I think not every negative player behavior is a Munchkin behavior. A Munchkin is a very specific type of negative player. And the point I made at the end, by the way, I want to bring this up again, is that, if you match that definition we gave a Munchkin, and your whole group does, and your DM does, and all of you sit down, you play that way, and you enjoy it, own it. So what? You're having fun. There's nothing wrong with that. If everyone's having fun, where it becomes a problem is when you're taking fun away from other people. And Munchkinism isn't the only way to do it. I will 100% agree with that. In fact, one of the first episodes James and I did were on bad player traits, and that was supposed to be split in 2 episodes. One where, bad player traits, what you do at the table, like throwing Doritos all over the place. And another one was bad things that you do in the game, like having your character shoot the NPC that another player is talking to. So I agree with you that could be bad. I disagree that is Munchkinism. Not every bad behavior is Munchkinism. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for that call. Thank you for the kind thoughts. I am definitely looking forward to the TNT game. I'm definitely looking forward to having you on for the episode where we do our next giveaway. Yeah. All right. I think I have 2 more feedbacks.
Hey, Jason here. So just listen to episode 101. I'm going to have to leave you 2 calls because I'm going to have to research some things like spider climb. But you mentioned George Washington's ancestral home back there in England. And it's interesting. I've started reading Washington Irving's 5-volume biography of George Washington. And like the first chapter is all about the back history in England of his family's history. So really interesting. And, it's timely because I just listened to that. As far as sandboxes go and how towns should be closer together and all that, yeah, except D&D's, arguably post-apocalyptic and much less sparsely populated. I mean, it depends what version we're looking at. So depending on the setting and the world you're looking at, there really wouldn't be. They may be more spread out, although they may be more clustered together, really, too. Hard to say. I always shape a little bit when people, well, that's not historically accurate because we're not playing a historical simulation. And it's not always Earth that we're playing in. Some games are definitely Earth with Christian gods and things like that, but not all. So, it's, I don't know. You're playing in a fantasy world, so why does it have to meet our historical norms? I never really understood that. As far as I think I owe you a call back on everything else because I need to research. So there's a Jose that owns the Audio Dungeon Discord where a lot of us hang out, but I'm not sure what Jose's last name is. I should know that, and I know I've heard it, but I don't know off the top of my head. So I don't know if that's the same Jose, so I need to research. So, Jose Perez, if I'm misidentifying you, I apologize. Yeah, I owe you another call back. So, anyway, great episode. Looking forward to next week. Take care.
Hey, Jason, thank you for that. So again, the Washington's historical home, Soulgrave Manor, it was in the village of Soulgrave. That was like just a couple miles down the road from my house in England. In fact, all right, so the UK listeners might get a chuckle out of this because it's not that way anymore. And I think I'm probably older than most of them, so they're not going to remember this. But at the time I lived in England, telephone numbers worked very differently from anything I'd ever experienced before. So my telephone number in England was Soulgrave 8269. So Soulgrave, just like that village, Soulgrave Manor, where Washington's family came from, Soulgrave 8269. So that meant if I was calling from any other house, well, any other phone in the Soulgrave exchange, like if I walked down to the castle where my landlord lived, it just, I know that's so every day in the UK, but for Americans it's wild. My landlord lived in a castle. I was on his grounds. If you don't believe me, look on a map someday. Google Maps, NN135QU. That was my postal code. That will bring you right by my house and just go up the road a little bit. It's not a big castle. You'll see it. NN135QU. Anyway, if I went to the castle and I wanted to call my house, I would just dial 8269 because we were still in Soulgrave. But if I were, say, in the village, if I were in Brackley, and I needed to call home, this was the day before cell phones. So you go in the little phone box outside the ironmonger, where I would have to stop to buy coal for my Rayburn stove. You open the phone box, and there's a little book in there. And in the book, it has all the exchanges, and you look up Soulgrave, and it had a list of numbers that you would have to dial. So you would dial those numbers, and then you dial 8269. And then if I were over at work at Upper Hayford, there were the little book, and you would open it up, and you look up the numbers you would have to dial for Soulgrave, and they would be different numbers. And not only would they be different numbers, but they would be different lengths. Like in Croton, I think it was 3 numbers I had to dial, but in Brackley, which was so much closer, it was like 4 or 5 numbers I would have to dial. And yeah, the phones just work completely different. I know, very off tangent, but it's one of those things that stick in my mind as memorable. But yeah, the point of that was that my telephone exchange where I lived was Soulgrave. That is how close I lived to Soulgrave Manor. As for towns being close together, so you said that we are not living in a historical simulation. I will agree with you 100%. And that is even why in that episode I said, whenever fun and historical accuracy clash, go with fun every time. The problem is not so much historical accuracy, but if you have players that are really into, like, you know, those players that are really into dungeon ecology, like if you have a dragon in your dungeon, they start saying, well, how does it eat? It probably needs to eat sheep every week, or, you know, the equivalent. How does it get that? Trapped here in the 4th level of the dungeon. And, you know, they pick on you for that. Or, if you will, that destroys their immersion in the game. Well, in addition to dungeon ecology, you have settlement ecology, right? And so if you have this little village that stands on its own, the reason that's not historically accurate is because it's not sustainable, right? Especially the way we look at our D&D villages, right? You know, it has a pub, and it has a blacksmith, and it has, you know, a whatever. And it's like, okay, well, let's just pick the blacksmith part, right? So he, you know, works all this iron and everything. Where does he get the iron, right? So you need a mine somewhere. You need an iron mine. And so that means you need miners. And not only that, to smelt the ore, you need coal or charcoal. And so let's say it's charcoal. And so now that means you need a bunch of wood. And so you need a bunch of wood choppers. And if you're on a plain without trees, where's all that coming from? And if it is, and then you need a kiln to convert the wood into charcoal, right? And, you know, that's only that. And then we get into the food, right? And so how many acres of land does it take to support the people? And not only that, the variety of food they're going to want, right? So this village does mainly wheat. Then where do they get their fruits? Where do they get their veggies? Where do they get their meats, you know? And so then you have to, and when you go into the way that it is in reality, that kind of takes care of itself, right? Because you have the town, and the town is big enough that it has all these villages, and it's all that. The thing that ruined all this for me is, wow, the second time I'm naming him today, S. John Ross, the guy who wrote Rhesus. He has a publication out there called Medieval Demographics Made Easy. And it talks about all this, where if you have this town, you know, and it has 3,000 people, you're going to need this many acres to feed them. So that means because a farmer can only work, you know, so many acres, you're going to have this many farmers in the area. And because you have that many farmers, that's going to work out to, on average, you're going to have this many ale houses, and you're going to have this many cobblers, and you're going to have this many furriers and all that stuff. So I read that, and it left an impression on me years and years ago. And so all that is still in my brain, and I have to remember to let go. In fact, I had to do this big time for the little town I made for your TNT game that's coming up. Because I was afraid that, you know, people are going to look at this and they're going to say, where does the blacksmith get the iron and everything? I just eventually said, let it go. It's a game. And if they're playing like that, well, first of all, it's only a one shot, so I shouldn't be putting that much thought into it, you know, and all that. And again, if historical accuracy conflicts with fun, go with fun. As for the stuff you're still researching, I haven't heard back, so I guess you're still researching that. And as for Jose, I actually, after the episode went out, I was like, oh, crud, I said the last name on the air. In general, I have a policy against doing that. And Jose, if you're listening, I apologize for saying your last name. Normally, I would just say Jose. So sorry about that, Jose. And if that is you that runs that Discord, hey, that's kind of cool. And if that's not you, hey, you're still cool because you wrote into me. All right, so we have one more feedback. It's an email feedback, and it's one of the gentlemen that sent email last time. Oh, you know what? I am just assuming that this is, I actually don't know what kind of name Øystein is. See, I still think it should be Øystein. I hate mispronouncing people's names. Anyway, he wrote in for in episode 101, and I replied, and he heard, and I got an email that says, thanks. He says, yeah, don't worry about the pronunciation. You were very close, and I'm used to all sorts of versions of my name after many years away from Norway. So yeah, like I said, looking at, I would say Øystein because it's EI, and I was always taught that in Germanic languages you go with the last letter. So if it's IE, it's Øystein. If you go with EI, it's Øystein. But Norwegian isn't really German, but it is Germanic. So I don't know. I'm going with Øystein. And he says, and on AD&D, don't tell anyone, but I really have a soft spot for, and he says the edition that he has a soft spot for, but he said don't tell anyone, so I am not telling you. He says, these days I mainly play old school essentials though, keeping it quick and easy. Life is too short to spend the gaming sessions looking up stuffs in books, right? Yes, Øystein, absolutely right. That is my philosophy completely. That is why I like single mechanic games. I am sorry, Daniel, but I like them for that reason. You don't have to look anything up. You just go with the story. Whatever the vibe is that's happening on the table, you go. None of this, let me look this stuff up. Anyway, he says, keep up the podcasting and congratulations on passing 100. All the best from Øystein. Thank you very much, Øystein. Thank you very much, Øystein. I appreciate that a lot. And again, thanks for listening to my show there in Northern Ireland. So that is everything. We are now all caught up with the feedback. Thanks for listening. Do send in your entries for what the heck is shirts and skirts about. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm chuckling. Yeah, send in your entries for that. Send in your feedback for anything else I said. Like I said, next week, the episode is a review of an RPG called Tunnel Quest. Jason joins me for that. I'll be dropping that on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. For my Americans, do have a very happy Thanksgiving. For my Canadian listeners, I'm sorry I didn't mention it before, but I hope you had a very nice Canadian Thanksgiving. Again, it's feedback@decahedron.com. It's the feedback number. It's sayhi.chat/decahedron. And it's www.decahedron.com/boards for the play forums, or leave off the /boards. Gives you a webpage that shows you all the ways to contact me with very clickable links, or they're in the show notes, or in the outro music that you are listening right now. I am sure of it. So until next week, happy gaming, happy life. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Decahedron RPG Cast. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voice message by calling 562-774-2278. That's 562-RPG-CAST. Or by visiting sayhi.chat/decahedron. You can also email us at feedback@decahedron.com. Links are in the show notes. For more information, visit decahedron.com. Remember that Decahedron is spelled with a K. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. Logos by Design Cat. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep those dice rolling.